The Venezianico Arsenale is one of my most anticipated watches for 2024. Anticipated because I already knew about this months ago and I can't wait to talk to you about it. But what's more interesting about this watch is that it actually reveals a secret that designers don't normally tell you. There's actually just two elements that we want to talk about this watch, the dial and the bracelet and case. Now, before we go there, let's talk about the specifications. The Arsenal is Venezianico's new integrated sports watch with a 40mm lug case and a 44mm lug distance. Very much desirable, but even more lovable is this 8.95mm case thinness. This is very much enjoyed and welcomed by watch collectors and enthusiasts. It has a screw-down crown that protects this Miyota 9039 movement. This is an hour, minute, and seconds caliber, even though the seconds is clearly omitted from this configuration. Another thing to note that even though this is a screw-down crown, it only manages a 50-meter water resistance, which can be a turn-off for many who are used to 100 or even 300 meters of water resistance on a sports watch. On my 6¼ inch wrist, you can clearly see that there's still some overhang from both sides, but nothing that I can't manage, considering that I personally wear G-Shocks all the time and I'm used to it. Also, you can clearly see that even the butterfly clasp is easy to operate and easy to close. A side cap closes the bridges off and it blends very well with the rest of the middle links. Another thing to note, this 16mm taper makes it extremely comfortable to wear. On the bezel, you can clearly see all of these small details and notches, but we can assure you that this is a fixed bezel despite having the impression of it being turnable. The bracelet has some considerable and modest articulation, but the clear showcase here are the very nice flat facets that gives off this dazzling light play whenever you turn or bend the links. As an integrated sports watch, Venezianico manages to pull off a very nice and solid first impression while maintaining the Venezianico spirit. So let's start with that dial. This dial is very striking and it's devoid of many of the elements that you usually find in Venezianico. Normally you would see Venezianico's flair when it comes to dials and the ornate arrangements and patterns that they have, even textures. Now here you could see the polished indexes, those skeletonized and polished hands, the emblem, and that's it. Those are the only elements that you'll see on the watch that's applied on the dial, and all of the branding is gone except for the name Venezianico, which is now found at the very outer rim of the 6 o'clock position. Now what takes its place though is a striking new dial, for at least for the brand, which is a Côte de Genève that's colored here in blue in this example, and they also have a purple and gunmetal gray or slate gray variant. A thing to look out for is the legibility. As with most shiny indexes and hands, they tend to disappear in the absence of light and when shadows take over. Compound that with a Côte de Genève finish and you have one really dark and sometimes completely illegible dial. Now let's talk about the case and bracelet. First, they have this concave shape that projects from the case downward to the bracelet, which is very pleasing in many ways and also quite comfortable when you wear it. On top of that, there's a clear chamfer, a clear and very pronounced chamfer that cuts from the case downward to the bracelet. That is very pleasing whenever you tilt it on with light. There's so much polished surface for light to shine on, and it just glimmers and glistens whenever you turn it. This polished facets also extends to the crown guard. Even though that crown guard is very small, it does project towards that direction, which is also very pleasing. Going back to the Tonda homage or Tonda references, you could see these coin edges that they say is a reference to the corner pattern of the shipyard's tower, which is the Arsenal. And that is a very nice and neat touch, but you cannot detach it from the already iconic Parmigiani watch that we are all referencing all throughout this video. Now back to the details. This also extends to the case back, which also is the main canvas of Venezianico. This has remained Venezianico's identity and signature, that they put some sort of art engraving on the case back, and this is no different. And they made sure that this, even though it's a closed case back, is a place for you to admire, a place for you to see some sort of art. There are people who may be criticizing that, especially knowing that this is an automatic movement, but I'm pretty okay with not showing that kind of movement, because if it's not decorated, it's not going to be any more entertaining than the engraved case back that Venezianico usually produces. Watch Dennis says here that what really impresses him is the thinness. And if you look at this watch, this is the first thing that I noticed when I unboxed this Venezianico. It's really thin. That 8.95 millimeter thinness is very, very impressive, and it gives you a certain impact immediately the moment that you open the box. Now, I could even contend that it's way too thin for my liking, but this is not the case for many seasoned collectors, as they know that there are many elegant watches in the luxury market that has this kind of thin profile. And now you can afford that for 800 euros. And this thinness actually comes at a price. Now, when we asked Alberto, they actually had to make some compromises for them to achieve this kind of thin profile. For them to do that, for example, you may notice that there's no seconds hand on this watch, because that seconds hand, they had to cut the hand stack of the movement and not apply or not put any other seconds hand on top of that center stack for them to maintain that very thin dial. And that dial translates to a much lower seating for the sapphire crystal. So now that is the secret, or at least one of the secrets that designers don't usually tell you, that you may be wondering why it doesn't have a second hand, but that is the reason here. Speaking of hands, this is also reminiscent of Parmigiani's design, as Watchman thoroughly agrees. Although he still thinks that gigolos around the world are Venezianico fans, the new Arsenal amazes him because of its price point and design. Now let's go on to the bracelet. Even though there are some criticisms about the bracelet, it's mostly received very well. This bracelet continues the same identity that the Canova has, which is a very pronounced taper, and at the same time they have this voluptuous and convex middle link. But this time around, instead of having a full voluptuous and polished curve, it's also flattened to maintain or to keep up with that contemporary flat design. Mazin Araimi Watches Club says that this is a beautiful watch, and he's so excited to also receive his own copy, but at the same time he's worried because this might not fit his 8-inch wrist. Now that's a very big wrist, and that's a very manly wrist, if I may add, compared to my 6.25-inch wrist, but I can assure him that this will fit that 8-inch wrist. Now the case size may look a tad smaller on his wrist, but it will fit him nonetheless. As you can see here, there's enough downward projection on that bracelet and that end link for it to support such wrists. Actually, on my 6.25-inch wrist, it just projects just a little bit, a few millimeters outward. I could still wear it, I could still tolerate that, but for many smaller than 6.25-inch, this might not be for you. Eagle-eyed viewers who saw the unboxing video, they may have noticed that the chamfer of the case does not match the first link of the bracelet. But that has been addressed already, and like here in this image that we are showing you, this is an actual production unit, and you could see that the chamfer now perfectly aligns with each other between the case and the bracelet. So that is only because of this pre-production runs, and Venezianico assures you that this is gone by the time the production models are hitting the market. Now, the second one, and most contentious point of all, is surprisingly the articulation. Now, this articulation, as you can see, it's not as articulate as many watches in the market. Now, those watches, if you could see their articulation, they can even bend upwards. And that is fine and okay. And actually, many people tend to give that as, or tend to view that as the standard when it comes to bracelet, that all bracelets need to be articulate. Well, this is not that kind of articulate bracelet. If you ask me as a designer, I think there are two kinds of bracelets. One that is super articulate, and the other are these kinds that prioritize aesthetics more than comfortability. All bracelets that are articulate, they tend to be round because they need to bend. Because they are metal, and the only way for them to bend is to have those round shapes or large gaps for them to be able to swing both ways. That is their kind. But here, the designers had to sacrifice that articulation for them to have such a flat surface. Now, you can imagine if they put so much curved angles underneath these links, then they would produce more gaps on top here, which is unsightly, especially for a surface that's trying to be as flat and as seamless as possible. And that is the key here. That is the secret that most designers do not tell you. Most designers would rather sacrifice practicality for the sake of aesthetics. Now, that is in itself not bad. That actually in many ways shows the integrity of the designer and a certain trust and confidence in their art. Now, according to Venezianico themselves, that is the direction, that is the vision that they're aiming for this watch, for them to continue the evolution of the Canova bracelet. And for them to achieve that, they had to make this as flat as possible. And of course, by doing that, you won't have the articulation that many other watches may be offering. The Venezianico Arsenal is a new direction for the company, a company that's known for its Nerede and its what's the other one now? I forgot. The Nerede and the Arsenal from Venezianico is a new direction for the brand, a brand that's known for their Redentore and their Nerede variants. There's so much from those two cases, and this is a third one, and I think they were able to create a new collection that is very distinct compared to before. Okay, they also have the Bucintoro, and they actually already have a Arsenal back in the time, but it's a completely different watch compared to this one. And I think them entering the integrated sports watch market is not a bad idea, especially when there's still a lot of people that are looking for alternatives to the PRX, to the Parmigiani Tonda for one, and of course the venerable AP Royal Oak. But this is not making a sports watch for the sake of making a sports watch. It also has the Venezianico DNA, and it continues the Canova design with the Canova concept bracelet, and I think they're able to achieve that vision.